Hey guys, Justin back here with another video, this time talking about prayer. I am loving doing these video interview series because it gives me a great excuse to reconnect with mentors and friends of mine. Today, you'll meet Joe Schmidt. Joe and I talk about prayer. And what I took away from this was this idea of don't feel shame about wherever you are in your prayer life and whatever prayer looks like. Make sure it's authentic. It's just a conversation with God. Whether you think you're praying or not, He's listening. So I hope you enjoy this. It's a wide-ranging interview with Joe, from his work that he does fighting human trafficking to how he prays with his family and his general thoughts of how he explores this. So I'm gonna run off, play with my daughter and family here. So we are celebrating Christmas on the farm with family. Wherever you are, enjoy this video and become a provider.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Joe.
So, for those, let me say, when I think of you, what do I think of? I think
I like this.
I think of a business guy, right? I think of a Christian guy, and I think of your Freedom United, obviously, which we'll get into. But then I think of one of the first guys that I met with and spoke with that for some reason I thought, I think I can just trust this guy. And I don't know why I thought that. And maybe we'll tie it into the prayer aspect of this whole conversation. But, so we've known each other for probably, I don't know, a couple years now.
Yeah.
2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it's actually longer than that, but yes.
Yeah. In a good way.
Everything's longer as we start getting older.
Okay. In a good way with
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
And so, thank you for agreeing to do this. This is my latest experiment with the fellowship, as you know. And so we're taking 4 classes this year through the fellowship program, and the goal is to make them better providers.
Yep.
So thank you for helping us be better providers.
I'm a big fan of the wheel.
Yeah. So the wheel is 8 characteristic traits,
Yep.
one of which is around being prayerful. And they're all around the theme of blessing or protecting, and the prayer one is both. That we can bless people through our prayers and protect people through our prayers. And so the reason I thought of you for the prayer one is obviously a very personal story, but there's 2 stories actually why I thought of you with prayer. One is when I was an app developer wearing that hat Crosscom, you shared with me the idea for a prayer app. I don't know if you remember that.
Yep.
Yeah. So the prayer app was something along the lines of, sometimes, especially in the Christian circles, we say we're going to pray for someone, but we may not. Theoretically.
Yeah. We don't a lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
And your idea was, hey, this app could maybe request a prayer request, and then once that person actually did pray for you, you mark something, and then that's more of a marker for them. So that's when I thought that was a good, genuine idea. And I don't know, by the way, have you done anything with that?
No.
Okay. It's a good idea.
No, but I'll pray for you.
There you go. So
I did the same thing with that people typically do when they say that they'll pray for him.
Right.
No, we actually did. We played with. We actually found one that was not even close to what we were talking about, and we played with it a little bit and did it a little bit. We made a couple phone calls to the church that had built it, and they had executed it not well, and implemented it not well, but it was enough. It was enough for the church to not make it a priority. Like, the conversation was enough that they were like, this definitely, it's not a slam dunk. And, as the church is assessing what they're going to work on. And I was only going to do it if we could test it at my church. If I had a clear beta group. So anyway, so they lowered it on the priority list.
Well, maybe we'll do it in the fellowship.
It's still genius.
Yeah.
I mean, not my genius. It was actually somebody else than I who thought of it one night. But the idea is just it's the idea of if you could work social proof into prayer. So, like, if while I'm praying, I was actually watching emojis float by of people that were proud of me for praying, or that were rooting for me. Or that were giving me thumbs ups. Like, it would be like having a cheering section in what you're going through. Because, it's nice to know that people are praying for you, but it's also really easy to forget that people are praying for you. And this would be a literal way that you could get pinged just to remind you that you're not alone. So it's still very fascinating and interesting.
And so, where did that idea came from? So when you had that idea of someone else, was it because you felt like I'm not praying as much as I want to, and this might help me, or I would just like to know that other people are praying for me? What was the catalyst that sparked the idea?
Honestly, it was the concept around community building and engagement for our church. So really more of a less personal, more of a corporate solution for the fact that a lot of churches today, they talk a lot about community. I also think that we're not moving fast enough. The Christian church is not moving fast enough down the path of the creation of this paradigm that we're living in now of technology and communication. Like we're still really stuck on, Sunday, and then there's an in between, and then Sunday again, and everything else in the world, there's not that. Everything else in the world is getting disseminated all the time, and you're taking in all of it all the time, and people are communicating all the time, and everything is all the time, and the church is still really focused on Sunday, and then there's in between time, and then there's Sunday, and then we wonder, why are church numbers dropping? Why are people not showing up to church as often? And it's just because the world is changing, and we're not quite changing with it. So it's really more of a solution on how can we go about changing the paradigm at church to help meet the typical need for drips of serotonin and everything else that everybody needs these days to be interested in something.
Yeah, that's interesting because part of the prayer exercise that we do in the fellowship is for the guys to submit a prayer request on Sundays, and then that way they are practicing the habit of offering up their prayers to the guys, and then we get it just via a simple text message, and so you get all these text messages on Sunday, right?
That's cool.
And then we make the commitment of at least one time during the week of lifting that up in prayer.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and I think that the technology piece of it is the part that we're the church is just kind of failing on in a lot of ways. Some are doing it well, some aren't. But I mean, the reality is, it's funny because even at our church, it's very forward thinking. It wasn't until this year that they started counting their attendees, that they started to include the online church in their attendance numbers, because like it took everything, like they just refused, like, because they didn't want people to do church online. They wanted to have it available for people who lived out of state and wanted to hear our messages or whatever, but they wanted people to come because that's such a core instrument of building the church. And so they literally wouldn't count the numbers, which I get. But now they've gotten to the point where they're just like, man, a lot of these people are just not going to come. Like, they're going to do church they're going to watch this online, and that's their shtick, that's their gig. And that's okay. Like, it's okay. It's better that they're doing that than they're doing nothing.
Yeah.
And we've got to figure out how to develop them from there. You got to meet people where they are. Anyway.
So you had that prayer idea. That's interesting, from a community building system. So it probably goes into who you are. You build businesses, and right now you're building out Freedom United. So for those that aren't familiar with Freedom United, what is it?
So Freedom United is an online community where it's a community because it's a whole bunch of people who have a shared interest in the topic of human trafficking and modern slavery. But the platform of freedomunited.org is a petitioning platform. So similar to change.org or Avaz or these other really big petitioning platforms. So we work with nonprofits all over the world who are trying to make change happen. And they'll come to us and say, we want to get a law changed in Lebanon. And because this particular law allows a rapist to get out of jail if he marries the victim. if he agrees to marry the victim, who in this case would be a child who's under the age of 18, that he had been buying for sex, if he agrees to marries her, all charges are dropped and he's released from prison, which is just whack.
Yeah.
And it's turned into a whole, in that particular case, it turned into a whole scam where traffickers are getting the Johns set up to get busted, because then they work out a deal with the parents to sell the daughter to the John. Like, it's this whole ridiculous thing. So a nonprofit in Lebanon is fighting this law that allows this to happen. They come to us and say, will you get behind this and create a global buzz? And so we have 6 million fans on Facebook. We've got a big email database. And we go about shining a big light on this particular issue in Lebanon, globally. A lot of times part of that will be a petition. So we'll have a signature, old school kind of signature petition, but we do it all online. And then we'll do actual petition hand-ins where we print out all the names, and we've got a big binder. And this year we've already done more than 10 petition hand-ins all over the world, which our goal this year was one a month. And we've delivered them to Parliament in the UK and the UN and all these crazy places. And so we'll get behind these organizations and help them get their goals achieved. Yeah. And so that's what I do now, which is all very similar to what I've been doing. I mean, it's a big online community. So I mean, we talk about ROI and lead gen and sales funnel and all the same stuff that I've been talking about when I was selling stuff on the internet. We're just doing it to try to save people from modern slavery.
Yeah. It's always fun to introduce you now because it's like, this is what Joe does. What are you doing? He's fighting human trafficking.
Yeah, I know. And then well, so it was. I was just up in New York. I was actually at the French consulate, in front of a crowd of about 100 of these wealthy, incredible New Yorkers, and I mean, like some of these, like these this is a room of filthy rich people from New York who were interested in modern slavery. And I got done, and it was like, I've got people walking up to me who are just like almost apologizing that their lives are so sad, like, wow, you're so amazing. And I'm sitting, and a big part of what I always talk about is, one of the things I think the world's missing most is people assessing their time, talent, and treasure and then deploying it.
Okay.
So we're missing the deployment phase, because people don't think that they have the time or whatever to jump into something and get their assets out there. And but it's always funny when I'm talking to these high capacity, incredible people who I would always think, boy, you're amazing. And then all you got to do is do a little bit of work to try to do some good, and then the whole table flips, and people are like, "Oh wow, maybe I should do something."
So then it's kind of an interesting question. So you're a believer, obviously, you're a Christian here, and a lot of times with nonprofits, you say, "Hey, this is how you donate money, or pray for us." But your nonprofit is not a faith-based nonprofit. So then, how do you go about honoring what you believe is the power of prayer, but not asking people to pray for the nonprofit? What does that look like in your world?
Yeah, so it's tricky in our world. There's really only one nonprofit in the global abolition space who is making who is operating at a global scale, really in the discussion and making really significant motion happen, who are pronounced Christians, who's a pronounced Christian organization. That's IJM. It's a great organization. They're kicking butt. They're probably the biggest in the space. But traditionally, I mean, when you're interfacing with the United Nations and you're interfacing with governments and you're trying to get your foot in the door, leading with where putting a cross on the homepage is not typically the easiest way. And I think Christ would say that was probably a silly thing to do, to create a barrier because of him for us to be able to get our work done. But so we decided not to be faith-based. However, I never shy away from the fact that we're a faith-driven organization, that their CEO is a crazy Christian, and that I base the majority of what I do on deployment of time, talent, and treasure, and the teachings of this Jewish rabbi from 2,000 years ago. And from a prayer perspective, so my team and I, which a lot of my team are not Christians, they're not believers, and the people that we're serving are definitely not Christians. The majority of the people that we're serving are from Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, and so they're from every faith that you can imagine. But we have, so I have a personal dedicated prayer team of about 12 to 14 people that is led by my mother and my aunt. I asked them to set the structure up, so they're pretty proficient for being 70, and she's a technology whiz. So that team focuses on me on a daily basis, but then also by request, I have them focus on specific things for prayer. So that team, they'll send me, little love kits every once in a while just to remind me that group is working on me personally. But then there's also a team of prayer warriors who works on our team overall. And some of our team knows that and they appreciate that. Some of our team thinks that that's Joe's weird mumbo jumbo, and that's okay too. They know me well enough to know that my intentions are good and that they're grateful that people are thinking about them and sending them good vibes or whatever they want to call it. So we really do it. I do it organizationally rather than kind of globally. Talking about prayer, but everywhere that I am, anytime that I'm on stage or talking or interviewing, it's almost impossible to keep Christ out of it because it's all part of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So, even it always ends up coming out something about even when I tell my story about learning about human trafficking, I always make sure that I explain that I was my church. I'm part of a life group, and they were all at my house on a Friday night, and somebody was teaching us about trafficking and modern slavery. So even that statement right there. So if I'm saying that to Forbes magazine, they're stuck with having to write that because that's the quote, and not necessarily screaming and yelling that Jesus is the reason for the season or anything like that, but but it works itself in there, and prayer does too, and prayer drives everything about the organization just because it drives its leader.
So I didn't know you had this dedicated prayer team. What prompted you to create that, or have you had that before for United?
Oh yeah, I did that before when I made the decision to start working on trafficking and modern slavery. Okay. Someone, and I can't remember who it was, but the first person that ever really pointed out the connection between child sex trafficking and Satan, where, and I think the person used the terms that if Satan had pornography that he liked to watch at night, that would be it, right? It would be watching children being sold into sex trafficking. That's what Satan would sit around and be giddy over. And the first time they ever said that to me, first of all, sometimes I struggle with the whole kingdom clashing and this whole battle of good and I'm an old Catholic, so we get confused with that kind of stuff. But the concept that if that would be one of Satan's biggest joys is modern slavery and human beings doing this to other human beings, and I'm going to dedicate everything I've got to fighting it, then I need to be ready because it's coming. I don't know what it is, but it's coming, and he's going to bring it. And if not for me, then for my wife and my girls. If that ethereal realm does exist, and Satan is going to attack us as a family because I'm specifically working on things that give him joy, then we need to be ready. And so I was very intentional in talking to them about it and building a team and getting them focused on just burying us up in prayer, which has felt like it panned out at times. Other times, I mean, I can certainly feel, the hammering of, the setbacks and things that I don't know if they're coincidence or they're Satan, but I mean, when we're poking him in the eye, you got to be prayed up.
Yeah, that's so great. I mean, I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
So the reason that I started telling you about, I reached out to you for this trait, and what's fun is, I could have picked you from multiple ones, just like the other people I sit with, but I picked prayer because I remember that app idea. It's kind of silly, but I knew that you were serious about it. Like, hey, let's not be inauthentic about saying I'm going to pray for you. Like, let's actually do this. And your mind is the e-commerce mind, the relationship building mind, the community building mind, like you mentioned about the church and everything else. And sometimes you just get a sense that someone actually does treat prayer seriously. And so, just like I didn't know about you having a dedicated prayer team in your work, that obviously demonstrates a commitment to it. And the other reason I brought it up, or you came to mind, was I remember, after Pop passed, I sent a text message to you and to others, and you just had a really interesting response, and to me at least, and it was, "I'll be on my knees shortly." And is that a common response? And is that how you think about responding to that kind of ask for prayer?
So, if I wrote that, then that meant that I was actually going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes. So I mean that when someone loses a parent, then I'll actually find a place and drop down and I'll pray for that person right then and there as rapidly as I possibly can. So yes, sometimes I say that. In that particular case, I probably said it because I was actually going to go do that.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I do on my go-to is, and this is typically for non-believers, is somebody will tell me something that happened, and I'll ask that person for the participants' first names. And it's always fascinating because, like, I know that they know why I'm asking, but, like, at first they're like, because somebody will say my mom's really sick, and I'll shoot them a note and say, could you give me your mom and dad's first name? And so I don't have to say to a non-believer, I'm going to pray for you, because then they're like, oh, here we go again. Like, I don't even know what that means. But when I ask for their first names, it's a totally different thing. And they'll tell me immediately, Bob and Gina, and then they'll write thank you, and I didn't even tell them why. But they get it. They get it, and there's something much more poignant about asking for someone's name than saying I'll pray for you, because it's actually showing interest rather than saying let me go work on my solution that you need, and I've got the solution over here, and let me go plug into that. So I probably use that more than I use I'll drop to my knees, but I probably just said that because I did.
Yeah. Well, it made an impact. I mean, for me personally, to hear that, because in that chaotic moment and season of life, you hear a lot of the prayers, and you feel it, and you appreciate it a lot more. And that's actually a phrase that I've used with others now, to say, no, I'm actually going to do it. And I think it just indicates there will be an intentionality here of taking a next step, which means a lot. And so, as you think about, you've obviously had time to practice these habits and in your own ways. Yes, you've mentioned about asking for people's names and thinking about how might I not only do this, but the community around me do this in a better way. For guys that are in the fellowship, young professional men looking to be better providers, what, if any, advice around prayer and developing that as a habit or characteristic trait that you'd give to us that are in the marketplace?
Yeah. I think that, well, a couple of things. One, I feel like guys will feel, so like praying before meals, I feel like guys, so typically what someone would say is, don't be afraid to pray before a meal, even if you're with non-believers. And that would be the normal response. That would be the normal wisdom that somebody would give. My wisdom would be, don't feel bad if you don't. Like, if you don't, it's okay. Because sometimes it's just downright weird. And God, and Jesus didn't, I've read his words all very, very closely, and he didn't specifically say, shine a big light on yourself in the middle of an important meal with a business client and make them feel uncomfortable in my name. Like, he definitely did not say that. He said, love people.
Yeah.
And so if that's not the way to love whoever you're meeting with, then it's all okay. So in the workplace, it's a matter of, I've prayed with people in my office. I've told people that I would pray for them. I've asked people for their parents' names. I've done all that, but always, and first and foremost, I do it with the intentionality of the recipient being blessed. Like, just because I think it's my obligation doesn't mean I shouldn't be blessing them first. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Nowhere in there does it say justify whatever the rules are that you think exist around praying. And so always trying to have intentionality with the people that you're working with, or your employees, or your friends. And what the other one, thinking about this as prayer, I was actually in parenting. So for some of these guys, I know they're just starting families or getting ready to start families or have young families. As I was thinking about this and you coming over, I was thinking about, do we do anything different when it comes to prayer than other people? And we do. I actually do. And I'd never thought of it until we were going to have this, and I started thinking through it. So we had a Catholic pre-meal prayer that was like beat into our heads, that everybody, it's one of those rote kind of traditional prayers, and not knocking those at all. It's fine if that's your shtick. But the reality is, for our family, the only time that we really pray as a group is before meals. Like, I'll pray individually with the girls sometimes about specific things, but my teenage daughter, like praying with it blows her mind when I start praying with her, and it actually just irritates her. Not to say that I'm not going to do it, but for us as a group, it's really the only time that we pray as a community, as a family. And if that's true, and you try to keep that tradition of blessing food, then that's where you teach your kids how to pray. And if you do it using the same prayer every single time, and it's rote, and the kids really forget about what the point of it is, then you're just teaching them that prayer sucks. And that prayer really doesn't mean anything, and you just rattle off the same thing, and everybody's head must be bowed, and you must be reverent, and that's how it is. Because ever since the kids were little, we've always, when we pray together, the main purpose is, first of all, I will probably every third prayer try to make everyone laugh. By breaking some humor into it. But the other piece is, when the kids were little, I would always say, bless this food and let us eat it, and it make us really, really strong, so that we're strong enough to do stuff that makes you happy. And that's kind of how I started, just because the kids didn't understand bless this food for the nourishment of our bodies, so that we can forever do blah, 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 whatever all the fancy stuff is. And now as the kids have gotten older, I've realized that that's just become that's sort of just how we operate as a family. So everybody kind of takes turns praying, and I'll just say somebody's name, and then they'll pray for the meal. But it's never rote. It's a genuine, heartfelt, and sometimes goofy thing. God, please help Olivia not pass gas during this meal, because she's been passing gas a lot lately during dinner, and if you could just help her not pass gas, that would be great. And then the kids laugh, but just teaching, it's such a good moment, and you might do it once a day, Like we miss the fact that we actually pray with our families as a community every single time we sit down at a meal. And we forget that it might be our most teachable prayer moment that we ever have with our families. And we turn it into, the same thing over and over and over again. And now I watch my kids, like I'll ask my 9-year-old to pray, and the stuff that she'll come up with is just, sometimes it's hilarious, and sometimes it's just genius. And and you're just sitting there beaming with pride, that she just thought, Grandma and Grandpa are here. I just want to thank you, God, for bringing Grandma and Grandpa here safely, and like that they drove a long way, and we're just really grateful that nothing happened to them while they were coming here, and like just all intentional conversational prayer, which is what prayer is.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the thing that I thought of that is a really helpful and for our spouses as well. I mean, whether you got kids or not, just to be doing that with our spouse, and really talking to God in front of her is much less uncomfortable before a meal because she expects it than it is when you're laying in bed at night and you decide as a couple, let's pray together. Like, that's always been weird. Like, I'm just saying, for me, it's a little weird.
A little bit of a jump there.
Yeah, it's a little bit. Probably less for me than for my girl. She's like, oh boy, here we go again. We're doing this weird pray together thing. I don't know.
Well, you're an authentic guy, so you don't want to do anything just because it's
I
because
don't.
Like someone says to do it.
Yeah,
Probably the opposite.
I typically don't. But that's a good practice that we do that has been really valuable in helping the girls understand what prayer is.
I love it. We define being a provider as blessing, protecting, and even with this trait of prayer, we say this bleeds over into each section of that wheel. And you've mentioned a couple. Well, it's been great. You mentioned the blessing your family through that, honoring them in that time of the meal, but really thinking of it not just this rote practice, but something that you can bless them with, and then the protection. It sounds like that's why you set up the group that you did, that dedicated prayer team as well. So it was great. Thank you for the casual conversation. Was there anything that you wanted to share that we didn't get a chance to as we close?
I think that I think just reminding guys that I really do. I simplify my faith just because I have to eliminate noise in order for me to focus, just because I'm a little ADD at times, and so just letting go of the rules around what they think about prayer and even Bible reading and things like that. So my newest thing. So prayer to me is just an ongoing thing. Basically, everything that's going on in my head. There's two people up there, right? It's not a self conversation. It's conversation that somebody's listening to. Like I just know that, like that's just now how my head works. I know that whatever's going on up there, there's a third party. It's not just me and myself. It's me, myself, and God. And so it's kind of everything that's going on in my head. And I think that I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a guy who wrote a really great book where he basically said, most people think of their lives as being a movie and they're the star of the movie, right? And you're thinking about the world around you and then your role as the leading actor and everybody else playing other parts. And it's a matter of making that shift between, I actually think that is kind of how we think, and that's not an awful way to think. It's just kind of logically how you would think, because you need to be thinking about your own actions first as you're doing them. But just to always be remembering that God's in all of that. He's kind of there all the time. And I think a lot of times as guys, there's shame about everything, right? Because we don't do anything right. Or there's always another guy who's like so much freaking better. Like I got a buddy who like prays over his kids before they get out of the car at school, every single day, and I'm like, you suck. Because I actually tried it with my girls, because they heard him say this one time, and the girls were like, "Oh, Dad, please don't start doing that, please. Yeah. Oh, don't do it." But instead, when we would drive to school, we'd all talk and have great conversation, and I'd teach, and I mean, like it was all good. And so for us, that wasn't our gig. But I think just not letting the rules worry you too much, and finding your own vibe and figuring out what your right thing is. And for me these days, and Bible reading's another one. You know, for me, I've gotten really in. I was mentioning this earlier, the red letters.
Yeah.
You know, just Christ's words, and so I've been in them. Like I've been totally into them lately, where I literally skip everything else and I'm just reading the things that he said. And for me, it makes it all a lot more palatable and interesting, because I think that those are really the words of God. And the rest of it confuses me at times. The rest of the Bible will confuse the crap out of me. And so figuring out the thing that works for you and your family, but then being consistent with it. But then just don't get overly shamed on everything that you think you're supposed to be doing when it comes to prayer, because then you'll just be bummed and sad. And don't get sad over prayer. Prayer should make you happy. And everything that you're doing is praying, because he's listening all the time. So I mean, it really is. Even if you don't think you're praying, you're really praying. So
Good.
Anyway,
Good. Joe, thank you.
Man up.